Hi, I'm Nick Schultz at the American Enterprise Institute. My guest today is Michael Auslin. Michael is a resident scholar here at AEI. Good of you to join us. I want to talk to you about a piece that you had recently in the Wall Street Journal arguing for reviving the F-22 fighter. What's so special about this plane that you made this case in the journal?
Thanks for having me, Nick. The argument that I was making is that the F-22, which is the finest fighter plane in the world, it was canceled prematurely by the Obama administration with help from the Bush administration because of its cost, because people felt that it was designed to fight in the Cold War, which we don't have to do anymore, and because the administration was shifting its military emphasis to counterinsurgency. So we didn't have to worry about having big traditional weapon systems like the F-22. So we spent billions of dollars producing it throughout the 1990s and 2000s, and then we decided to cap the program at 187 planes, which when you break down the way we use these planes means we only have about 30 of them to fly in combat at any time globally.
So 187, you hear that number, you say, oh, that sounds like a lot, but the reality is
much less.
Numbers that you can use at any time are not that many.
Much less, and that's for every weapon system. You know, we have 10 aircraft carriers, but we only have 3 or 4 available at any time because you have to rotate. Some are being repaired, some are broken, some are going back and forth. Same thing with airplanes, same thing with combat troops. So the arguments that were given that we have enough of these airplanes, I think were first of all completely wrong. Then the Obama administration decided that the bulk of the U.S. fighter fleet for the next generation would be the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which is an excellent plane, but was not designed to do the things the F-22 was designed to do. The F-22 is what's known as an air superiority fighter. It's designed to fight other airplanes and clear the skies and control the skies. It also can have significant capabilities to gather intelligence, to provide information on what's happening, and also has a ground attack capability, so being able to get in to heavily defended areas that are not only defended by airplanes, but more importantly by surface-to-air missiles, and destroy those missiles. Then you send in the F-35s, and their job is to attack whatever you want to be attacked on the ground. That is a ground attack aircraft. It's a multi-role fighter, but it was not designed to do what the F-22 was designed to do.
But so the argument was that the F-22 was a plane from an earlier era in terms of what the threats were to the United States. But what you're saying is that that's not true. That it actually there are all sorts of vital functions that concern now. What are some of those? What are some of the threats that the U.S. faces that, say, only the F-22 would be well equipped or capable to deal with?
Well, the primary one today is penetrating heavily defended airspace, where they have these very advanced surface-to-air missiles. The F-22 can do that because it was designed not only to be stealthy, a 5th-generation stealth aircraft, you can't pick it up easily on radar, but because it has what's known as super cruise ability. That's the ability to go faster than the speed of sound at plus Mach speeds without using its afterburners. So it can actually cruise at that speed, which means it gets in much quicker to the target area, releases its weapons, and then gets out. It also flies at a higher altitude than the F-35. The F-35 also is not super cruise, so it's slower. The F-22 can go up higher, and of course, you know, with the kinetics, the way the weapons are designed, the faster and higher you are when you release the weapons, the more powerful the impact is. So they can get in and they can get out. The other thing that Secretary of Defense Gates argued several times in justifying the cancellation of the F-35 was that it faces cancellation of the F-22 is that we face no peer airplanes, meaning there's no other 5th-generation fighters out there. And he said we won't face them for 20 years. Well, today that's true, but when Gates went to China in January, just 2 months ago, or 1 month ago, the Chinese flew a prototype of their own 5th-generation fighter. The Russians have flown a prototype of their 5th-generation fighter. Both of these airplanes are not ready. It'll be years before they are ready, but we know that both of those countries are developing them, and we know that they'll sell them abroad, which they do with all of their weapon systems as soon as they're ready. We haven't sold the F-22 abroad. So the Chinese and Russian variants are twin-engine fighters, the same way the F-22 is. They're bigger, and the Chinese version is bigger than the F-22, which means that the F-35, which is a single-engine airplane designed for a specific role, potentially in the space of a decade or so, could be going up against much more powerful fighters that may be stealth, certainly have speed and power and big payloads. So the point is, at the end of the day, it's what does this mean for how we fight wars or prepare to fight wars? It means that the United States, which has controlled the air since the Korean War basically, may not have air control, air dominance in the next 15 years or 20 years. That means anytime we want to put our troops or ships in harm's way, they're going to be at greater risk. It also means that when we fly and ask our pilots to fly into contested areas, we may be sending them into areas where we know that their planes are not the most capable planes out there, and therefore they will be at higher risk, and we will wind up losing more Americans. That's what the bottom line's about.
So two more quick questions. You mentioned the Chinese are working on a fifth generation fighter, which they've just, at the beginning of this year, released right before Secretary Gates is over there. The Russians as well. You also mentioned something interesting, which is that the Russians or the Chinese could sell these aircraft to potential buyers around the world. So in addition to any potential conflict with the Chinese or the Russians, what other potential conflicts could the U.S. be involved in where we would need the capacity of the F-22?
Well, we would yell and scream about it, but there's no reason why the Russians or the Chinese wouldn't sell F-22 type fighters to Iran, which means that the Israelis would not be able to get into that airspace, in addition to Iran's air defenses, the surface-to-air missiles. The Chinese certainly could let a copy slip to the North Koreans, so that both the South Koreans and us would not be able to get into North Korean airspace if we had to disable nuclear weapon sites or to disable missiles. Secretary Gates stated just a few months ago that he believes North Korea will have the ability to launch a intercontinental ballistic missile to the United States in 5 years, 2016. That's something that we want to be able to defend against. One of the ways to defend against it is by making sure we can attack it on the ground, but we may not be able to get in to North Korean airspace to do that without an airplane like the F-22, especially if the F-35 is not ready. So there's a number of other areas you have to be worried about. Iran, North Korea. The Turks right now have F-30. They are part of the F-35 consortium, but if they were able to buy their own F-22s, that is something they could buy. You could see a proliferation of these planes around the world, and ironically, the country that would be outgunned the most would be the U.S., simply because we have global responsibilities. So you can foresee a future where our leading-edge technology, and the F-22 is by far the finest fighter ever built, is nonetheless massively overwhelmed by the numbers of comparable aircraft and air defense systems around the globe. And when that happens, at the end of the day, this becomes a political issue. A U.S. military commander will have to say to the President of the United States at some point in time, we cannot do what you want us to do, and we're going to have to find another way to deal with it or accept much higher risk. Okay,
final question for you. Obviously, the F-22 at the moment out of favor in official Washington. You have the Secretary of Defense who's opposed to it. The program's been capped. What's the right number of these fighters in your estimation, and what's the likelihood that there could be movement in Congress to try to shore up the program again, expand it?
Well, the Air Force did a number of studies, and they came up with a baseline of 242 that they needed, or even better, 337. They accepted 242, but really it was about 340 or so that they said we need as the bottom level to assure that we could carry out any mission with confidence. Below that, you raise the risk level because of these issues of how you use the plane that I talked about before. So I think somewhere if we could get to 250 of these airplanes, combined with about 1,500 F-35s, meaning you reduce the F-35 purchase from 1,700 to 1,500 or 1,400, and then move it over to the F-22s, then you would have the type of mix that we want. We do that today, by the way. We have F-15s and F-16s working together. We don't ask them to do each other's job. In the future, we're saying the F-35 is going to do two jobs, not one. So I think those are the numbers you'd be looking at.
And then that would be budget neutral then, right? I mean,
that's what I argued.
There's
it would
a big
be
concern that we don't have money for all of these things anymore. And
right.
what you're saying is you could change the balance just a little bit, and that you would be able to have the desired outcome, but without breaking the bank.
That's what I argued. It has to be budget neutral, meaning the Congress does not have to appropriate more money, Defense Department does not have to ask for more money, and the contracting parties, Lockheed Martin in this case, they get the full amount of what they were promised. I think the budget neutral solution is the appropriate solution, because there's no reason to unilaterally cut the purchase of F-35s when we've already contracted to build a certain amount. As for movement, and you asked about movement, there is stirring in Congress because of the Chinese J-20, their fifth generation version. There's movement in Congress because the F-35 is behind schedule and above budget. So there's a lot of concern that we're going to wind up paying a lot more money for the F-35, maybe $100 million per copy, when the F-22 can be bought at somewhere about $175 million when you take into account all the development that has been done, so what we call flyaway costs, what it would now cost if you continued producing it. So we're going to be paying more for less capability, as opposed to shifting funds to allow us to get greater capability with what we've already committed to. So I think there's a little bit of movement in Congress. There's some interest. What I think will happen is that one day we're going to be faced with a crisis, and we're going to be surprised by the Chinese ability to build these planes, for example, and people are going to start saying, well, why don't we have the airplanes that can do the job? Then we're going to go back and probably spend a lot more money trying to fix a situation that we could handle today.
Okay. My guest is Michael Auslin, resident scholar here at the American Enterprise Institute. Michael, thanks for joining us today and talking about it. At AEI, I'm Nick Schultz. Thanks for joining us.